Classic World of Warcraft is the only MMO that interests me. A 14-year-old game being rebuilt and re-released is the only game in an entire genre that I truly, wholeheartedly enjoy. I think that really speaks to the current state of MMORPGs, and that isn't for lack of trying other games. I've tried games that came out around the same time as WoW, games that predate World of Warcraft and that WoW took inspiration from, Korean-developed MMOs like MapleStory, Ion, Lineage, ArcAge, Black Desert Online. I've tried Guild Wars 2, Final Fantasy XIV, Elder Scrolls Online. I've tried pretty much every single WoW killer people have hyped up over the years, and absolutely nothing compares to that original World of Warcraft experience. I've even tried newer AAA shooter-looter / MMO light titles such as Destiny and The Division, and the only thing running through my mind while playing these games is, this is cool, but I could be playing WoW right now. Not to say any of these games are bad per se, they just don't keep me coming back. So what is it about World of Warcraft, and more specifically World of Warcraft up until recent expansions, that makes me hold it in such high regard and keeps it in my top 3 games of all time list? In this video, I will be going over why I think World of Warcraft is so special, and why despite all the negative press surrounding Classic WoW and Blizzard as a whole, I remain hopeful for Classic World of Warcraft. The sense of wonder and adventure is something that absolutely no modern MMORPGs get right. There is no sense of journey or adventure at low levels. The leveling experience of vanilla World of Warcraft was made in a way that ensured players always felt like they were having fun. And sure, a lot of it was due to the game being new at the time, and the sense of discovery that came with that fact, but it was also that leveling and the low-level player experience in general wasn't just a means to an end. Going from Durotar to the Barrens felt impactful. You were no longer in the hand-holding noob zones. The Barrens felt dangerous, and with that sense of danger also came the need to group up with others. This meant being social. This meant joining or creating a group to tackle missions you couldn't dream of completing by yourself. Some of those people you partied up with would become friends and later on guildmates. You would go to those people for advice or help on a quest, for a party when you wanted to run some dungeons, and as backup if you were getting ganked while leveling. These are all experiences and events you could be a part of well before hitting the max level of 60. Hundreds of hours having fun before even coming close to the endgame. And that word endgame is what so many developers, and modern Blizzard is included in this mind you, are so fixated on. Everything below max level is half-assed and usually never utilized again in most MMORPGs. It's all there just to get you to max level as quickly as possible so you can play the quote-unquote actual game. I'm sure you've all experienced this before. You have a friend you're trying to get into WoW. You start explaining how they have to level in order to actually start the fun stuff once they hit 120 or whatever the cap is now. To a new player, this is ridiculous. It should be ridiculous to anyone who sits there and thinks about it for more than a second. Asking players to put in hundreds of hours before they're finally rewarded with the actual game is asinine. I have fun just making new characters and messing around while slowly leveling up in vanilla private servers. Of course I want to hit 60 eventually, but the journey there is just as fun, and debatably even more fun in some regard. The heart of WoW, and one of the aspects of it that makes it stand out, is how much fun you have along the way in your own player-created adventure. Everyone's is different, and if you ask players who played it back then, chances are most of them will have at least a few stories to tell that they still remember after all these years. That's how impactful this game is. After a decade and a half, I can tell you the exact spot I first got ganked, the name of the very first guild that I joined, and how it felt to hit 60 for the very first time. That is something I simply cannot say for most games. If you've ever come by any of my streams, chances are you've probably heard my beliefs when it comes to game design and what constitutes a good game. Personally, I think graphics, art style, and presentation in general are important, but gameplay is king to me. The way a game feels when it's played, the mechanics and how they work with one another, and the systems woven in between the two are the most important factors to me. I would take tab targeting and the global cooldown system over the newer, more fast-paced action combat a lot of modern MMORPGs employ. This is coming from someone who completely dislikes JRPGs because of their turn-based combat. For some reason, the slower-paced combat resulting from how WoW treats encounters with enemies just works for me. Perhaps it's because I played it for so long, I don't know any other way. I don't know what exactly it is, but I feel it's engaging, but not overwhelming. It's extremely simple to pick up, but has depth and sophistication when you invest the time to learning your class and its optimal rotation for both PvE and PvP. The game is just fun to play, and although that doesn't sound like high praise, believe me, coming from me, it is the best thing I can personally say about a video game. There are games much prettier than WoW by today's standards, but none of them are as fun to play, again in my opinion, as Warcraft. Sure, games like retail World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV are much harder to play at a higher level. They require more mechanical skill, communication, and know-how compared to vanilla WoW, but there's something inherently captivating about being inside Molten Core with a group of 39 other people. It still feels so epic to stand under the mighty Ragnaros as you're slowly chipping away at his health next to your guildmates and friends. Learning rotations and min-maxing your DPS while also dodging boss mechanics is fun, but it's the entire cohesive experience that makes the old gameplay really shine. Growing up with an interest in epic high fantasy tales like the Odyssey, Lord of the Rings, Excalibur, and Harry Potter among many more, World of Warcraft was the perfect combination of every aspect I enjoyed from those stories. Keep in mind, WoW also originally released around the time that high fantasy was at its peak in cultural relevance. The Lord of the Rings movies and Harry Potter were destroying the box office. Young adults who grew up in the 80s with Dungeons and Dragons were also at the perfect age to start supporting their own hobbies. Games like Ultima Online and EverQuest were there to give everyone a taste of what MMORPGs could be, and Blizzard did what it did best. It took inspiration from all these other mediums and combined them into a uniquely crafted world. They took a look at MMOs at the time and trimmed all the fat. All the boring, excessively grindy, and punishing aspects were removed, but all the adventure, lore, and engaging gameplay was still there. I missed out on the games that I mentioned before like Ultima Online and EverQuest, but from what I've heard and researched, these games would have probably turned me off from MMORPGs, to be honest. Keep in mind I was a kid that barely knew what he was doing on WoW when I first started, so you can imagine how complete and utter garbage I would have been at these big boy MMOs. Combine that with the fact that I was already a fan of Warcraft 3 and the Diablo franchise, and it's no surprise I was hooked. I can create a magician that can control frost, arcane, and fire magic and take it on an epic journey through a world inhabited by fellow players, dangerous mobs, players on the opposite faction, and huge raid bosses that could potentially drop loot that would make my character a legend on my server. I was all over it, man. Nothing hits me harder with nostalgia more than the original World of Warcraft soundtrack. Seriously, I could pick any song from the OST at random and it instantly transports me back to 2004 when I first heard these masterpieces. A lot of popular games have amazing soundtracks, but so rarely are they as memorable as the game itself. World of Warcraft would be nowhere near as good as it is without the brilliant work of Jason Hayes and his amazing team. And it's not just the music itself, but how it's integrated. The music is not on a constant loop, although you have the option to loop it if you want. Rather, it slowly fades in at random moments, allowing you a brief sample of the particular zone's theme before slowly fading away into the zone's ambient sounds. These themes work so perfectly with the overall style of the environments that in my mind, I can't separate the two. Often when I read or hear the name of an old zone, the music that belongs to said zone is the first thing I think about, sometimes even before the agriculture or layout of the zone itself. Combine this with the stellar sound effects of swords, daggers, axes, and maces clashing against mobs and spells whizzing through the air, and it makes for one of the most immersive experiences you can have on an MMO. Even today, when for most games I tend to mute their music, I find myself leaving WoWs on. Say what you want about the direction of the game, but the music is something they always nail. The key component, the number one reason vanilla was so special. World of Warcraft is home to tons and tons of dangerous monsters and heroic, larger-than-life NPCs. But without you guys, all it would be is an empty, lifeless world. You, your friends, your guildmates, your dungeon party, your battleground group, your rival on the opposite faction, the players that make up the Horde and Alliance, you guys are the reason the game has stood out above all others in its genre. I cannot wait to start my journey and come across fellow like-minded players and add them to my friends list. I can't wait to join a guild and help out however I can. I can't wait to raid with this guild and get to know everyone a little better while also taking down the hardest bosses the game has to offer. And now I can also share those experiences with you guys, the viewers, through videos and live streams. Summer 2019 is going to be a good time and I hope you guys will be there to hopefully share some similar experiences. So in conclusion, Blizzard did an amazing job crafting a timeless world with an art style that will never get old. A world filled with mystery even after all these years. A world full of entities that can kill you or aid you in battle. But most importantly, they created a game that made you step outside your comfort zone to progress. A game that forced you to cooperate and coexist with others. And in a world that is increasingly becoming more and more about personal safe spaces and never reaching out past what you're used to, the return of such a game couldn't come any sooner. Thank you so much as always to everyone who decided to give the video a watch. I really do appreciate it. Also a big thank you to you guys for helping me reach 4,000 subscribers. It really does mean a lot, you guys. If you haven't yet, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. I plan to make a lot more World of Warcraft content leading up to Classic's release. Thanks again, you guys, and I'll see you guys next video.